This is still a writing and review channel, but bear with me for a quick history lesson. 1896 Russia was a bit of a mess. I mean, a starving public on the brink of revolt against a monarchy in critical condition is a mess if I've ever seen one. It didn't help that an inexperienced Nepo child called Nicholas II was made Tsar of the Russian Empire at just 28 years of age, but he believed in his birthright and was determined to get his country back on track. He even promised free food to anybody who attended his coronation as a show of good faith. For reasons known only unto himself, Nick too thought that it would be a great idea to basically set it all out on a table and let the public have at. Between poor crowd control and a legendary lack of foresight, a mass of thousands shoved past each other in a mad dash for just a scrap of the loot, and the ensuing stampede killed more than 1,300 people. What I'm trying to say is that some ideas sound good until you stop to think about them for a second and realize that they can easily go awry. This is also true for writing, on which more than enough advice continuously makes the rounds as it is. A lot of it is good stuff, but a batch of hollow, vague, and blatantly unhelpful platitudes get handed out like candy and have gotten lost in translation through the years. So I thought I'd do what I do best and take to the internet to scream into the void about what these sayings really mean and where the disconnect is. I'm tackling the worst offender first, because if you're going to conquer Olympus, then you might as well start with Zeus. If you made it as far as the 7th grade, then I guarantee you have heard this phrase even if you're not a writer. Number 1. Show, don't tell. It's been repeated so often that it's basically a meme by this point, but what does it mean? Don't force feed information to your audience, let them see it in action. And that's it. That's all you need to describe that practice, and anything longer is a waste of your time. It's meant to immerse your audience in the world you've created. Some writers, however, take it to an extreme degree and give you nothing in the way of orientation, which gets murky fast. Consider a hypothetical story where an obscure detail turns out to be the key to everything. But you totally missed it because you didn't know where the writer wanted your attention up to then and you were still trying to get your bearings. You'd be totally lost, and for good reason, right? I'd amend this supremely useless statement to show the big stuff, tell the little stuff. Show us that your protagonist is optimistic. Tell us that they prefer tea over coffee. Please note that I'm not saying you have to have a voiceover deliver details on a silver platter because that only works for Peter Jackson and Frank Darabont. Instead, try to drop it into dialogue in a way that feels natural. If two characters are meeting in a restaurant, have one ask if there's a vegan option, and voila! We know that they're vegan, and you can move on to the meat and potatoes of the scene. Of course, you'll only want to include that they're vegan if it's relevant, which brings me to number 2, kill your darlings. This axiom holds that if something isn't absolutely essential to your story in several regards, then you must cut it for the sake of brevity. Or at least people think it does. Scholastic circles have a word for this kind of assertion, and the word is bogus. I get the reasoning behind it, but I have major gripes because it leaves zero room for world building or tension relief. What it really means is that you should mind how much you're trying to fit into it. I'll be the first person to complain about a bloated or meandering plot, but not every movie or show has to be Baby Driver. Sometimes you just want to see the good guys pop into an ice cream shop and exchange witty remarks. Yes, be careful of the pendulum swinging too far in the other direction and getting the Mandalorian, but follow it to the letter and you wind up with supportive scenes being ditched in favor of saving ink. Audiences will have serious questions that don't get answered, which is no good for your career. No good. It'd be more useful to say leash your darlings. Let them exist, but not take over the narrative. How much relief you need is varied across stories, so keep the tone you want in mind and be wary of going overboard in either direction. Number 3. Subvert expectations. This one gets more problematic as time wears on. It originally meant that you should set up a narrative element to look like one thing and later reveal that it was another thing all along. But the core tenet that's been lost to time is that it has to make sense with what's been established. See, it used to be that stories traveled slower than they do today. Tropes and archetypes took a while to take root in public consciousness, meaning that you, the writer, had a bigger window to use certain elements at will before they became old hat. With streaming bringing movies and TV to you with the press of a button, and the internet deciding what's hot and not faster than you can say go touch grass, there's a lot of pressure on modern writers to be creative with story structure itself. 2 plus 2 equals a number of ridiculous plot twists and bizarre setups thrown in as a desperate attempt to garner a reaction from audiences. In fairness, it does get a reaction. It's just this kind. I don't know if I would alter this idiom per se, but I do advise you to treat it like a garnish and not the focal point. Number 4. Write what you know. This is actually a solid starting point, but like its predecessor, it's relied on too heavily. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, yeah? Now, there are 2 parts of writing what you know, and those are what you know on a thematic level and what you know on a literal level. Let's say I'm a farmer with a child I dearly love. Any experienced parent will tell you that you have to loosen your grip on your kids as they grow up, so let's further assume that I figured this out. I could write a story about a farmer who learns to let his kids go, but the wall I'd run into quicker than you can say I feel called out is that there's only so much territory I can explore because I'm too close to the subject and I've already made my peace with it. Instead of taking this adage for more than it's worth, try using either a lesson or a setting you have personally lived through. Farmer Me could write about a time travel adventure that occurs on a farm, or a spaceship captain who has to learn to loosen his grip on his children. See how much more interesting both of these options for me as the writer are? Energy bleeds through into your work, and if you care, your audience will care. Simple as. Number 5. Highlight the theme. A story's theme is basically the point, message, moral, lesson, etc., etc. It's extremely difficult to pin down even after you've finished writing it. You do, however, want to at least aim for a theme or even a handful of themes, because if done right, it invites audience participation with the subject. When it is misused, which happens a lot these days, the story feels more like a PSA than events that could really happen. The key word is highlight, not center. Lots of writers start with a theme and build from there. It's not an inherently bad approach, but it does run the dire risk of coercing every element to fit with it in a way that just doesn't gel. My conjecture is that this is because you'll inevitably produce characters with conflicting personalities and character is key, but I digress. Theme should be a line of best fit. Pick a starting place, write your story, and let the theme emerge in the process. Go back and alter what doesn't fit after your draft is complete, and repeat until you have a product you like. But please, for the love of all that is good and right, do not let your story be described with the word topical. Number 6. Mind the pacing. I'll be real, this one is straight up bunk for reasons that I already have or will soon outline depending on when this video gets released. The short version is that it means nothing except to hint that you should be on the lookout for anything that feels out of place in your draft. This is a shorter explanation than the rest in this video, but a longer one is coming up in a few minutes and I want to conserve space. I'll link the video for my deep dive on this pacing issue in the description whenever it gets put up. Number 7. Save the cat, kill the dog. Unlike most of today's topics, this can be traced back to a primary source, a 2005 Blake Snyder book called Save the Cat, the last book on screenwriting you'll ever need. Unfortunately for old Blake, it was not the last screenwriting book the world would ever need, so now you have me here rambling on YouTube. Look, he had a lot of good ideas, and Save the Cat was revolutionary at the time. They've just become standardized in the 2 decades since its release. The proverb he has become legendary for tells you to have a hero save a cat to show that they're a hero, and make a villain kill a dog to show their evilness. It's pretty much just an extension of show don't tell. The catch is that it's wearing a different suit and it's somewhat more specific, so many people don't clock the similarities. Even if they're wary of show don't tell, they can fall headfirst for this version. Now, should you forego it altogether? No! Things become cliche because they work. It's a wonderful tool for building character, it just needs to be used cautiously lest it overshadow number 8. Lower the hero, raise the villain. This principle ties in with subverting expectations, and means that you should have characters contradict themselves from time to time because real people contradict themselves. In theory, it's a great idea, but it's like salt. A little goes a long way. Too much puts a weird taste in your mouth and leaves you very liable to throw up. Some fun examples for you. The Joker is self-destructive and willing to take on any enemy if it amuses him, but a viral clip from Batman the Animated Series shows that he quakes in his outlandish purple boots at the mere thought of facing the IRS. Having been audited and almost exposed for my illegal sock puppet deathmatch arena, I can relate. This moment shows us that despite his bravado, the Joker is still mortal and fears it like the rest of us. Or at least he fears taxes. Similarly, Tony Stark's crash out at the end of Civil War carries serious weight because up to that point, he wasn't the type to go around smacking whoever he wanted. In fact, it was his whole platform in the movie. You knew he meant business when he started wailing on Bucky because it was so out of character for him. Compare either of these with Carly Morgenthau from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The show wants to sell her as a woman of the people willing to make the tough calls, but everything she does paints her as an inept terrorist, basically. I mean, does she really have an end goal besides pirating dangerous technology and making demands of the government? QED, used sparingly. Number 9, hold a mirror up to society. Of all the easily misconstruable writing advice out there, this is the most easily misconstruable. It's also not one I encourage at large, and I admit that it makes me biased. The most I can do is acknowledge it. Take what you can from my analysis, though, because I do have a point to get at. Hold a mirror to society instructs you to illustrate a behavior, moral, custom, or institution that's endemic to your society at the time of your writing, and elaborate on why it is bad. The trap is that it can rapidly become preachy. This is probably in the top 10 for how to lose your audience, along with make it a multiverse and ramp up the stakes. Commentary is a precarious subset of writing and should be handled like the crown jewels. You want to subtly layer it into your story, not beat your audience over the head with it. Kind of like Theme. Just look at Sir Terry Pratchett. I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but I can always tell what he was getting at, because his satire comes from knowing when and how to apply humor to underscore the absurd situations that his characters land themselves in. Try to keep all of this in mind for number 10. Use a negative character arc. Oh, brother. This is far and away the one that bothers me the most because it inseparably screws up your story on a core, structural level if you miss the mark. Big if there. I appreciate a legit example, but it has to be near perfect to achieve the desired effect, and writers with a fraction of the necessary skill just love to go straight for it. Humans, shockingly, are flawed. It's easier to lean into these flaws than to battle them, meaning that we can and do take this option. A lot. Sometimes, though, a character starts from a normal or even good place and gradually decays throughout the story. This is known as a negative character arc. The breakdown is more a symptom of outside circumstances than a flaw of internal logic, but the definition has been warped all the same, so here we are. See, our society has become so self-centered that it's distorted our perception of basic cause and effect logic when it comes to wrongdoing. If a person robs his neighbor, we don't think, wow, what an unfortunate decision that was. We think, I wonder how they were failed by the system that led them to this. Don't get me wrong, understanding why these things happen is crucial, but we cannot allow it to blind us to the fact that somebody knowingly wronged another person. If you think I'm being judgmental here, I dare you to apply that logic to the Holocaust. Anyway, out of this cultural shift comes a pattern wherein an antagonist is automatically meant to be the object of sympathy for no other reason than their backstory is just so sad. No. This is a nonsensical argument, and everybody knew it until a few years ago. It's a cop-out of the highest order. I have zero tolerance for it. If you choose to imbue a character with a negative arc, they need to be all in and they need to be bad. Otherwise, two things happen. A, you're effectively telling your audience that it's okay to replicate a character's actions if they feel like the victim, which is a great way to pour gas on the fire. B, you're messing up any moral standard in your story so that none of it means anything, so who knows what you're trying to say anyway. Good and bad both exist, so act like you know that or you've got no business writing. With all this in mind, and for the purposes of this video ignoring the glaring moral aspect, I challenge the very meaning of the phrase as it has come to be understood. Most so-called negative character arcs from the last decade are not arcs at all. If your ultimate goal in writing is to stir up a discussion about insert X socio-political issue here, then your character development will be lacking. There's no significant change the character undergoes because they're only there to serve as a plot device. All the change happens around them. They have no agency and therefore can barely be counted as characters, certainly not as having experienced an arc. But expert, oh bodacious belligerent one, what about Arthur Fleck from Joker? Alright, you got me there. Not only does he have a compelling journey, but he openly blames the world around him for why he is the way he is, and it doesn't come across as annoying. But that still doesn't detract from my complaints. This is the apple that fell very far from the tree. You know, looking through my copious notes, I'm noticing a trend emerge. None of these maxims are necessarily bad to include in your story, but they can all become dead weight if you OD. Writing is subjective, which itself has become trite, so it's impossible to quantify what makes writing good or bad on a consistent level. One thing that is more or less applicable to anything is that you should utilize a good mixture of different strategies to make something unique. Kill your darlings with a negative character arc. Highlight a theme by subverting expectations. Decide what to show and tell while you write what you know. The moment a tool becomes a crutch is the moment a story dies because you're using formula in place of original thought. That, dear viewer, is why all high-end productions appear so homogenous in recent years. That and, of course, the beast of the machine, but that's a topic for another day. If we've gotten ourselves this deep into the hole, then we can claw our way back out with just a little creativity. Point of all this being that if you think I'm pedantic now, you ain't seen nothing yet.